They have the potential to be landmark negotiations. For the first time in a generation, the Senate is seeking to successfully overhaul U.S. immigration law. It's an ambitious undertaking, trying to solve one of the thorniest issues in politics and tying that solution to financial aid to Ukraine as it fights a war with Russia. The talks began with urgency and with hopes to cut a deal by the holidays, but that urgency has clearly given way to resignation. It's going to take a while, which means both immigration reform and Ukraine might be put on hold well into 2024, a year in which an election has immigration as a top issue among Republican primary candidates and Republican primary voters. But no matter what happens next, there's already a political impact. By agreeing to negotiate a separate dispute to supply aid for Ukraine, Congress has set a precedent. Future money for the war zone might also get tied up and bogged down in complex negotiations on very unrelated matters. Major Garrett and Ed O'Keefe join us now. Major is CBS News' chief Washington correspondent. Ed is CBS News' senior White House and political correspondent. Ed, we know the Senate negotiators resumed this morning. They're back at it tonight. The White House is involved in all this. Where is this negotiation headed?
It really hasn't changed much, Scott, since the weekend when we know everybody was talking. Well, there's still just a lot of talk. Democratic leaders suggesting there's been progress. Republicans saying they're pleased that the negotiations have continued as seriously as they have. But over the weekend, a handful of them said, we want to have a group meeting, a caucus meeting in January after the break to really go over this, to ensure Republicans at least aren't giving away the store. Meanwhile, the White House and Democrats involved in the negotiations are also starting to hear about it from progressives and Latino lawmakers in the party saying, don't give away too much on an unrelated matter. If you're going to debate border security on issues of war funding this year, what's to say next year there isn't some other unrelated matter like abortion policy that has to be negotiated away? Or would the White House even do that? Why are you negotiating over immigration and border policy at a time when, for example, you're standing with voters who are Latino or younger and worried about the issue of immigration, at least on the Democratic side, is not in great shape?
Major, so many of these big things are done against a hard deadline. This is clearly being rushed to a degree, to a deadline. Is that a good sign or an unhealthy sign of where things are?
It's a sign that the White House did not engage as directly as it probably should have a month ago on some of the concessions it now is willing to make on the Republican side of this ledger, Scott, which is all about border security, tightening up the application and approval process for those seeking asylum and detention either in a third country, namely Mexico, or in detention facilities or arrangements here in the United States that are much more like the Trump administration, much less like the current Biden administration. And when you talked about the difficulty historically of working out immigration policy, that's because the left was getting something and the right was getting something, and bridging those gaps were always difficult. I know I've covered that many, many years. This is not about bridging those gaps. This is all about how much on the Republican side is the Biden White House willing to travel and to concede almost entirely on policy matrices decided and articulated by Republicans. That's what's making this all the more difficult, not only to get Republican satisfaction, but tamp down, if possible, restiveness, if not downright opposition, on the progressive left.
This is a battle, Ed, that really feels like it's being fought on Republicans' preferred turf. Is there any sense from anybody at the White House they could have or should have gotten involved with this earlier?
Oh, even if they did feel that way, Scott, they'd never say it even privately. This is one of the most stubborn White Houses, maybe, when it comes to negotiating, certainly on this issue, when you have a president who is no fan of having to take up the issue of immigration policy whatsoever. Major suggested that they should have gotten engaged a month ago. Some would argue they should have perhaps engaged in October when the initial ask for border security funding was included in the president's initial funding request. Democrats and Republicans have faulted the White House for that, for literally waiting until last week, like most college students do this time of year before they head home to mom for the holidays, to finish their term papers. That's exactly what the White House is caught in here now. And, you know, the big goal of the fall for this White House was to get security funding for Ukraine and Israel to ensure that those operations could continue, to meet the president's goal of democracies standing against autocracies and ensuring that American troops are never committed to these two conflicts. They failed, or they failed so far, with the clock ticking, with the House gone for the year. And now they're going to have to somehow save face through January and hope that Republicans, when they get back, are still willing to negotiate as we inch closer to a presidential primary season that's going to put the current president's former and likely future nemesis back on the ballot and talking every day, multiple times a day, potentially, when he's not in court, about the issue of border security and immigration, as he has in recent days, once again roiling the race by talking about things that certainly anger and upset a lot of people in this country.
Yeah, Major, let's expand on that. Not only is Donald Trump talking immigration, he's using that phrase, poisoning the blood of America when there's immigration to America. I suspect he knows exactly what he's doing, but what do you make of it?
So there is an opening for the former president to be very aggressive in this space. Centrist Democrats know that it's very difficult to go to their district and say we need $61 billion more for Ukraine, but not money or policy changes at our southern border. Even in swing districts, that doesn't really work. Americans, independents, some Democrats, and almost all Republicans want border policy changes. That's a political reality, one that the White House is late in acknowledging, but has acknowledged. That's why these negotiations are going on. For the former president, this creates what appears to be an opening, but not an opening as broad as he has rhetorically taken it. Even those who want tighter border security policies don't want, and there's no indication in our polling at all that suggests people want anyone seeking the presidency of our country to sound like Benito Mussolini, sound like Adolf Hitler, to use any rhetoric that even comes close to that kind of exclusionary and authoritarian language, othering in mass stereotypical language anyone who might come to this country seeking asylum, as the former president does. Yes, does it work with a very core, small part of his base? Probably. But does it work more broadly, and is it something suitable for a general election campaign? It certainly isn't, even though the former president at times indulges the fantasy that it is.
Ed, real quickly, what's the White House reaction to this latest line of rhetoric from Trump?
They called it grotesque and fascist-like, suggesting that it's everything that the United States should not be. And it was the Biden re-election campaign that likened what former President Trump said to Adolf Hitler regarding blood poisoning and whatnot. Also called him out for quoting or standing by Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin in those remarks on Saturday night. You'll continue to hear them do that throughout this as necessary, as needed, because part of the strategy here at the White House is to remind voters, look, it's either me or him. And if you're okay with him, fine. But if you're not, I may be your only and your best option. And so they will call it out as needed. And they believe, ultimately, when the rest of the country starts paying more attention to the election process, because we appreciate and understand that most are not necessarily right now, but when they realize that he is potentially going to be the nominee, whether that's as early as January or whether it takes until March or April, then they believe really the coalition that existed before will start coming back, because they'll realize that it's him again and something they can't support.
Have an extra moment, Major. What do you make of that theory? It seems to be that the coalition will reform that hasn't reformed just yet.
Well, the best way to motivate, mobilize, and activate the 2020 Biden coalition is former President Trump. There's no question about that. In a strange way, former President Trump needs Biden as his political boogeyman, if you will, and President Biden and the coalition of 2020 need Trump as a great uniting force to put many other issues, important though they are, to the back burner because of the sense of, if not mortal threat, near mortal threat that they believe former President Trump presents. Of course, there are those in the Trump coalition who believe President Biden represents a kind of mortal threat. So you have this existential attitude about the future of America. Both campaigns will try to cite that and use that. If 2020 teaches us anything, demographically and otherwise, that there is a net advantage in that 2020 coalition coming together more for President Biden than former President Trump.
Major Garrett in New York, Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Thank you both.